All right, today I will be talking about Contrapposto by Dave Eggers. The reason that I picked up this book is actually kind of sad, I guess. It popped up on Kirkus on the front page, and I was really surprised because it was literary fiction on the front page of Kirkus, written by an author. Or written by an author. You know what? Fuck it. I'm just leaving that in. Written by a male author, which then I looked it up, and it was a white male author. And the cover was really striking, so I clicked on the review, and it was positive. It was a book on the Kirkus front page, written by a white male author without LGBTQ themes, and was positive. Which, oh yeah, and is literary fiction. That's also important. So, wow. And lest you think that this is like really really picky, I want to bring up a review that I just had to pause the video to go look up of Forbidden Mountain on Kirkus's reviews by Brandon Mole. And at the end of the paragraph that is the review is the line, "The leads present white," which has nothing to do with anything else in the review, has nothing to do, so far as I can tell, with anything to do with the book. It is just a random bullshit comment thrown in there for no reason, which is obnoxious and unnecessary. So this is the kind of shit that goes on at Kirkus. And nonetheless, I kind of just visit the front page from time to time to just see what they're promoting. Obviously, I don't have the greatest appreciation for the work that they do there, and I particularly take issue with the types of reviews that both Kirkus and Publishers Weekly peddle, these sort of one-paragraph non-reviews. But more to the point, with this, I thought, this has to be a pretty special book to get past all these sort of things that you just don't see often. And then I saw it was published by Knopf, which for me, Knopf is a lot like A24. I will not read a book because it's published by Knopf in the same way that I will not watch a film because it's done by A24. But if there's a story or a film or a book that I'm interested in and it's published by Knopf or made by A24, that can be a lot of times the kind of make and break on whether or not I will check it out. Because Knopf publishes Murakami, published the Morning Star series by Nosgard, published Nathan Hill in The Knicks, and a few other books that I have really enjoyed. Like, as a publisher, Knopf is the one sort of name that I really know because I have enjoyed, or so many of the books that I enjoy have been published by them. So yeah, very eager to check out this book because honestly, I don't avoid American, like I read translated fiction for the most part because it's what I want to read. But I really just don't like what the US publishing industry and the UK publishing industry has put out over the past the last decade and a half, really. It's very much stuff written for people who already agree with the thoughts being portrayed. It's stuff that doesn't really challenge readers so much as it is just preaching to a choir. And I don't care for it. It's really boring, it's really dull, and I just have absolutely no interest in it whatsoever. But it does pain me because there are good American authors that are contemporary, moving outside of the obvious Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Hemingway, and of course, I can't fail to mention Steinbeck after my glowing review of Grapes of Wrath. So, or not review, but look at it. So in that sense, but I still have really enjoyed, I already mentioned Nathan Hill. The Knicks was fantastic. Wellness had some issues, but still, I think overall a solid book. I enjoy Jonathan Franzen's work. I enjoy Jonathan Lethem's work. I've mentioned Paul Auster a few times as, not a favorite, but I really enjoy a lot of the ideas behind his work. The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay I enjoyed. So, there are a American authors that I want to enjoy, but or rather that I do enjoy, but they're fairly rare. So I was really like eager. I was like, oh, dude, nice. Maybe this will finally be another American book. And I looked at the author, and he has some other acclaimed works. And I was really, really looking forward to this, to the extent that even though I'm on a new book buying ban, I made an exception, paid full price for the hardcover of this book. And yeah. No. Okay. So, the book, as I read about it on Kirkus and a few other places, it was really what stood out to me was the art aspect of it. And in fact, on the back, Richard Russo's quote starts with Contrapposto begins with a simple question: what is art? Only to get the book and open and find on the inside flap, Cricket Dib, born on the American prairie, which, by the way, a name like Cricket really called to mind, for some reason, like an author like some of your, not John Irving, maybe John Irving, Philip Roth, like, I don't know, I'm just getting like kind of those vibes. Very sort of Midwestern American writer type vibe. Which, of course, born on the American prairie, has no particular prospects or ambition until, in grade school, he realizes he can draw. He soon meets a girl, Olympia Agriros, 1 year older, who's captivating and brilliant and far more worldly. Recognizing his talent, she convinces him to deface, with profound vulgarity, a popular playground. Under her direction, he does it willingly, already in love, and thus begins a 65-year entwining of Cricket and Olympia, encompassing friendship, a working partnership, and a love affair. They go to art school, an experience of dubious value, and then navigate the art world for the next 50 years, together and apart. Contrapposto is a moving, very funny novel about allies and art and what it means to be an artist. All through their lives, Cricket sees Olympia as his soulmate in destiny, while she is always his champion. Romantically, while she is always his champion, romantically, her eyes are always seeking something and someone else. So, fuck me, this is gonna be tomorrow again. I hated that book. Absolutely hated it. A lot of the technical details in that book were wrong. A lot of the way that games are made in that book were wrong. But mostly I found the characters absolutely fucking insufferable, because it was so focused on their relationships that they just seemed like absolute losers who had no lives outside of their stupid drama. And I have zero patience for books like that. It's kind of funny how every once in a while I come across people who have no patience for introspective books. They think it's all just edgy angst. And it's like, this is how I feel about 90% of romance plots, is it's just like, oh my god, get a fucking life, grow up, look inward, look at yourself, because you are so unhappy, and you're just seeking relationships for your unhappiness. And rather than doing the inward exploration that you need to be comfortable with yourself, the books and these characters are just written in a way that they constantly are seeking gratification from other people. And it's disgusting and it's unhealthy. And I'm just going to say right now that Contrapposto, unfortunately, has that same problem. It follows this traditional trope where you have a shy, quiet character, again, it can be male or female, who is fascinated or enraptured by a more outspoken, assertive, again, male or female, whatever, the opposite gender, and they latch on to them, and through this assertive character, they form a dependency bond. They become dependent on this assertive character, and this assertive character becomes dependent on their admiration. And it creates this toxic cycle where the toxic person, the more assertive character, is able to go off and be an asshole and have all these other relationships and really fuck up their lives, with the comfort that they can always be comforted by the less sure of themselves character, who will always be there for them, regardless of how it may impact their own life. It's a horrible situation to be in, and very rarely never in my experience have I seen a book call it out as extremely toxic behavior. That the assertive person is basically manipulating the dependent person, and that the dependent person really needs to figure out how to stand on their own and gain their own internal validation, rather than being entirely reliant on the external validation of this more assertive person. So in that sense, and the really unfortunate thing about this book, not quite to move into the pros and the cons, but is that it really does focus so much on the relationship, that the art aspect of the book really exists to prop up the relationship, rather than being its own thing. At times, it does manage to become its own thing, and that is the only reason I was able to finish the book. The parts of the book where Cricket, the main character, is away from Olympia are far and away the best parts of the book, because you actually get to see him act as a character. But unfortunately, due to some other elements, like I said, I don't want to get into the pros and cons until after a recommendation, but the recommendation is pretty firm pass for me on this book. I usually talk about what kind of person do I think would enjoy this book, but in this case, I guess if you like Tomorrow for some reason, but I absolutely hated that book. I wouldn't have recommended it to anyone, and yet it's like a bestseller, so it's not my type of audience. I don't know what the audience is. I don't understand how this book has so many quotes, like Andrew Shangir, ravishing, extraordinary, Lauren Gioff, I love this book, Lily King, even Ruth Ozeki on the back. This book speaks to my heart. How? Like, legitimately, like, and I don't mean this in a hostile way, but given what I'm going to talk about in the cons, I don't understand how there's even enough here for people to get attached to the characters to enjoy this book. This book is less like a novel to me and more like some brief snapshots of a person's life where we don't even get to know anybody well enough to form a real connection. Like, and I don't quite understand what everybody sees in this book. Utterly bewildering in that sense. So moving on to the pros and the cons. Pros, it's interesting how it has that sort of American writing style that I enjoy, but that God, I don't want to fall back. I always fall back on it's well written, but there is, like, within the first few pages, I was like, okay, this is an American book, and I haven't been able to pin down why. Like I mentioned in Rolling Thunder, Distant, or Honeybee's Distant, I've already forgotten the name of that fucking book. The piano Japanese book, you can look it up in my reviews. That I finally kind of honed in on the kind of language and the sentence structure that really, to me, spoke of a contemporary sort of Japanese style. In this, I recognize the feel and the pacing and the rhythm of a lot of what I would call like American fiction. Like I said, like I can just read this and in a few pages be like, yeah, this is an American writer. And it's the problem is I still don't have it pinned down why, exactly why. I can point to a few things. Like there's one point where they're describing a jungle gym, and the jungle gym is described as, let me see, I sent it to a friend here, so I should be able to find it pretty quickly. The play structure was new and made of wood. It had recently replaced the old jungle gym, a multicolored digestive system of metal tubes and rusted bolts that had been there all Cricket's life. First of all, the name Cricket is very American to me, choosing that as a nickname, rather. But a multicolored digestive system as a way of describing an old jungle gym, it's difficult for me to explain why, but that just seems like a very American turn of phrase, a very American way of framing it. So I can't pinpoint exactly the nature of what it is that makes the style distinctly American. Just that it's there, and I enjoy it. This is a very, in terms of the craftsmanship of the prose, easy, enjoyable read with some clever turns of phrase, some annoying ones, but mostly fine. In terms of the cons, however, or usually I try to go pro con, but I'll stick with the pros. Well, I'll go to a con and then kind of try to tie this into a pro, because the biggest con with the book overall, the single biggest problem that I have with this book is that it never goes into enough detail with any of its characters or situations to have any depth, to create any layers to anything. And part of this is probably the effort to try and depict an entire lifetime's worth of events, but it really made me appreciate the map and the territory, because that was another book that managed to accomplish something very similar, much better, and in a much smaller space. In fact, had I read the map and the territory after this, I would have been much kinder to the map and the territory, because it accomplished everything that this book tried to do in that particular aspect of covering the life of an artist over the entirety of his life so much better in so much less space. And it accomplished this by cutting the cast of characters way down and focusing in on those few characters so that you actually understood them. Contrapposto is divided into 7 parts, and the problem with each of these parts is, unto themselves, they're so... Oh, God. Is it even a problem with the parts? Jesus Christ in heaven. Nothing in any of the parts, none of the characters in any of the parts are ever explored in any amount of detail or ever get enough screen time to have any dimensionality to them for us to ever understand the characters, for us to ever get attached to them, for us to ever understand how they tick. So, for instance, in the first part, you have essentially like 5 characters. You have the young Cricket at 10 years old, his grandfather, his mom, their abusive, seemingly her mom's abusive boyfriend, and Olympia. In this first part, even though the abusive boyfriend is the antagonist of this part, all you ever learn about him is that he sells real estate and he's a dick. That was not a rhetorical pause. That was me actually legitimately trying to remember if there was anything else about this guy that was worth remembering. All you learn about Cricket's mother is that she used to be married to Cricket's father, who left when he was 5, and she's nice to Cricket. She enrolls him in art classes, so she's at least mildly aware of what he's into. And she also is part of a volleyball team, and she occasionally flees her house to get away from Robert, who is her abusive new boyfriend. Honest to God, for the first 2 parts of the book, I wasn't sure if Cricket was meant to have some kind of neurodivergence, because he rarely speaks. He seems to have this internal world, maybe. I really don't know, because again, it's third person, so we never get into his head. But he gives the appearance of having an internal world, but it never gets outwardly expressed. But because we don't have access to that internal world, and again, like, even though he is the main character of the book and we spend most of the book with him, his actions are so all over the place that it's difficult to tell if his awkwardness comes from him being uncomfortable because he's not used to being in these kinds of social situations, or if they come from him being uncomfortable, or if they come from, like I said, some kind of neurodivergence. Because the book, in every single part, and in every single chapter, focuses in on a specific snapshot or situation, which sounds fine, but the problem is that these situations are very, very rarely scenes of day-to-day life. The actual day-to-day existence of cricket is something that the book, and every single part between them, there's a generational leap. I say generational, there's like a leap in time, sometimes, 10, 20 years. And this makes it difficult to keep track of who Cricket is as a person, because at the start of each part, you get a brief explanation of sort of how he lives his life, but we never see that. We never get to see what Cricket acts like in normal situations. We never once see Cricket at school. We never get a sense of how Cricket interacts with his classmates, like before college. So school, which to most people is this big part of their life, is something we never get to see for Cricket. We never get to see, because again, the book is so focused on Cricket and Olympia that if it's one of the few times that Olympia is not in the scene immediately, you know that she's going to show up, because that's just that's what the whole book is Cricket and Olympia. And if Olympia isn't there, then it's just buying time until she shows up so that the plot can actually move forward. But I want to contrast this against the map and the territory, where the book starts with a really intimate moment of Jed. I think his name was Jed. I actually can't remember because there's a character in this book whose name is Jed. We'll get to that. The intimacy where you have Jed and he's in his apartment and the radiator isn't working and he's trying to get his radiator fixed. And you get an idea of the kind of person Jed is, but also you see his space. You see how he lives on a day-to-day existence. You understand the core of who Jed is, at least in that sense. Another example would be Never Let Me Go. You fundamentally understood what day-to-day existence was like at Hailsham. You understood what it was like when they went out to the barns, and you understood what it was like as a carer. Every step of the way, Ishiguro spent the time to show you how the characters operated under normal circumstances, so that when the abnormal circumstances came, we understood how the characters' behaviors juxtaposed against them at a normal state. This is something Murakami does. Like, this is like the thing that he focuses on, that he gets a lot of criticism for, is how much he focuses on the sort of interior day-to-day lives of his characters. It's something Nosgard also does. And like, this is so important to painting and helping us understand who the hell these people are. But the problem with this book is it does not matter who the character is. Even the main character, Cricket, we never see them in a normal space. It is always some kind of exceptional circumstance that we see them under, and consequently we never get to see what normal means for them. Like I said, for the first two parts, just wasn't sure if Cricket was neurodivergent or shy. Or again, like I said, does he speak normally at school and he just has a hard time at home when he's under the pressure of Robert? I don't know. I can't understand how these characters relate, because the book never takes the time to actually build characters, which is absolutely astonishing in its own way. And it's doubly true for Olympia, because she is a character who really needs to have layers to her, to be something other than the most toxic human being imaginable. And I believe this is where like it gets annoying, because much like with The Perfect World, where I had the same complaint that we never got an interior view of the character's existence, even though that book was even worse for it because it had a first-person narrator for most of it. We never understood who the characters were, what made them tick. We never got to understand what drove them, what motivated them. And again here, like it's slightly different, but it still has a lot of the same problems. Again, like I'm just not really sure what normal is for these people. I'm not really sure what drives them. So, for instance, Olympia is a really driven person, but why? Is it because she hates her stepdads? Is it because she holds a grudge from her stepmother? Does she not want to be like her stepmother? Is her constant flirting with men due to the fact that she grew up under her mother's influence and feels the need to go about using men to get her a means to an end? She mentions multiple times that they should be liberating people, so the free sex and whatever shouldn't matter. I don't know. I don't know anything about her, or her motivations, or why she does anything. Like, why even art, to her? Why is it so important that she, be this particular art gallerist? I have no idea. I know nothing about any of these characters because the plot is just so quickly moving that it never takes the time to establish the characters. It's just conflict. But it's conflict because I don't understand. But because I don't understand the characters, I don't care about the conflict. Which brings me to that pro that's kind of nestled in here, that every once in a while, there are moments where he breaks away from Olympia and the book is able to actually interrogate a few of its themes. And these are the reasons that I was able to finish it, aside from just wanting to talk about my utter bewilderment at the popularity of this book. Because, for example, there is a scene where he goes to, it's not really like a farmer's market, but it's some kind of market event with, and this is when he's in college, with his coworker, or not with his coworker, with Jed, who is supposed to be his friend, and with his mentor at the time. And they're going around looking at the various things that people are selling, and he's asking his mentor, is this art? So they'll pass by a series of photographs, and he'll ask, is this art? And they'll have a few sentences about it, and then they'll move on to something else, like somebody is selling belts, and it's like, okay, is this art? Because there's craftsmanship to it, but there's also personal flares added in there. And this one chapter is doing more to interrogate the question of what is art? The simple question that the book supposedly asks at the beginning, but so far as I can tell, absolutely does not. In fact, it doesn't even ask it until well over 100 pages in, closer to 200 pages. And this one chapter is more interesting and tells you more about the characters than do most chapters in the rest of the book. And even then, it is such a surface level interrogation of the question, because it's not really asking why do the characters believe what they believe. It's not seeking to divide craftsmanship from art. It's not really delving into the idea of artistic intent beyond the sort of baseline question of, does artistic intent matter? It's raising a lot of questions, but it's not really interrogating them or delving more deeply into them or challenging them. But it is nonetheless one of the few instances where it does actually take its theme to a deeper level. But to cycle back to the cons, unfortunately, and, I'm just going to say from this point on out, spoilers. Usually I save spoilers for themes, but I feel like I'm already kind of talking about the themes, and it's really difficult to sort of separate out pros and cons without talking about the cons and how the cons fail the themes. So at this point, I'm just going to say spoilers. I'm going to be talking about how the cons sort of fail to develop the themes throughout the book. So in that sense, I need to be able to just explicitly talk about certain things. So the other sort of big con building on this lack of characters is that there is a scene when they first enter the art college, in which it is one chapter, and it is an art critique, and you have this one character named Kyle, and he shows his picture, and everybody in the and it's a little Polaroid. And everybody in the class talks about how this Polaroid is really impressive and how it's deconstructing art and how it's fighting the capitalist system, man, blah, 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 whatever. It's pretentious art critique. A lot of it is up its own ass, and that's kind of the point. Then next up goes a student who has painted a really skillful painting, and she's expecting to be praised for it, and the painting gets absolutely torn apart. It's not pretentious enough. It's not technical. It's technically good, but it's not saying anything. Essentially, the whole thing is lambasting her for doing something that's quote-unquote trite, even though it is skillfully well done, and it is what 90% of people would consider far and away the superior thing. It is more artistically, it is better, quote-unquote, art. And then the guy who goes on to become Cricket's tutor steps into the room and dresses down the entire classroom, calling them basically a bunch of phonies, that even though that they want to be more authentic, really they're just so far up their own ass that they can't see the sunlight, and that they're killing sort of art and artists with this pseudo-college, pseudo-intellectual bullshit. And it's such a frustrating way of handling a situation, because it's just this one chapter and that's it. And this whole chapter is basically ripping on the college liberal art experience and how pretentious it is and how up its own ass it is and how disconnected from reality and broader tastes it is. Which, on its own, is something that I, broadly speaking, agree with. I heavily agree with it. I think that the current sort of MFA writing, like on the writing side of it, the sort of current MFA writing program is hugely problematic, leads to a lot of really fanciful sentences that, as I said earlier, just regurgitate the same themes over and over from a bunch of privileged students who've never actually, broadly speaking, been out and really experienced things, because they've been in college for a few years and they think that this somehow imparts upon them knowledge and wisdom that they're exclusive into, despite the fact that fucking anybody who's been to college knows the majority of this shit. But that's not the point. The point is that while I appreciate criticizing the shallowness of this critique, it is itself a straw man. It is setting up a bunch of pretentious college liberal arts douchebags, and then it has the old sage come in who is above them all and dresses them down. In terms of actually saying anything about the current college system, about the way that it interrogates art, it is completely flaccid, because it does nothing to talk about the struggle between how we talk about art and how easy it is to struggle to find the language to apply objective conversation around something that is ultimately so subjective. Because I find that I myself can often end up talking about very pretentious sounding things when it's not that I mean to sound pretentious. It's just that the language around how we talk about art, due to the subjectivity of art, in many ways necessitates this kind of pretentious language. And the idea of making art that is counter to a system that is revolutionary, that does something unique, is one that I think has merit, even if, being a sort of outspoken critic of a lot of the sort of postmodernist novels, where I do think that they're way more clever than they are actually speaking to the human condition, I nonetheless appreciate the intent behind them. And this is what I mean when I talk about interrogating a certain theme. Interrogating a theme is looking at both sides of the issue, giving both sides their say. And even if an author does ultimately side with one or the other, it's really giving them balance to the point where you as a reader are able to appreciate both sides more, even if you don't necessarily agree with the side that the author goes with. The problem with this particular scene, and this is really kind of indicative of the whole rest of the novel, is there is no deep discussion. There are pretentious college douchebags, and there are the traditional artists, and that's it. And sure, this does kind of come back in terms of the pretentious art versus quote-unquote traditional art later on when we do revisit Kyle, but in terms of talking about the college liberal arts system, which, as I mentioned on the inside flap, college liberal arts, an experience of dubious value, I think that that's underselling what it can bring to people. And I say that as somebody who is very frustrated with the pretentiousness behind it. I still think that there is a lot of value that can be found there. It's just a question of how it is currently being implemented. But anyway, I'm just repeating myself at this point. The point is, the scene is so poorly portrayed that while it is a comedy and it is farcical, it also ends up not really saying anything of any meaning on the actual state of that. And this ends up being the detriment of the whole entire book, because throughout the whole entire book, one of the themes is the sort of relationship between art and commerce, where Olympia represents somebody who absolutely wants to make a living, and you have Cricket, who never wants to compromise his values. And in never wanting to compromise his values, continues to constantly be overlooked, overshadowed, whatever, by other people. The problem is Cricket is just one person. His experience is just one experience. And even then, he does compromise his values multiple times throughout the book for Olympia because he is such a simp to her. And the other thing, and this almost has to kind of go back into another con, is kind of tying back. Okay, you had that one chapter where Cricket, where they're dissecting the things in the college art class, where they're doing a workshop. Let's talk a little bit about Cricket and his journey as an artist. He draws spaceships and stuff, and they're really cool in the basement of his house. Then his mother asks him, or gives him lessons with this Romanian woman, and the absolute first thing that he draws with her is absolutely marvelous. It's fantastic. It's great. So great that it catches Olympia's attention. He enters into a contest and wins it. Granted, it's not that piece that he painted, but the book is able to deceive you into thinking that for so long, because that's just how amazing it works up this first piece. Later on, he goes to an art academy, kind of on the sly, and in the art academy, out in the hallways, are pieces that they hang up of other people's work, particularly talented students' work. He walks in, and the very first day, you're talking about somebody who had to be taught that the whole thumb thing is about proportions and measurements, and is surprised to learn that the distance between, and I also found this interesting. Again, this is the kind of stuff that actually works for me when the book does, like I said, stop talking about bullshit relationships and actually just focus in on art. That the distance between two eyes is one eye. When it's talking about the proportions in the actual artistic stuff, that's the really compelling stuff. But anyway, he walks into this class not knowing this, and by the end of the class, his very first class, his teacher looks at one of his drawings and hangs it up in the hallway. So Cricket's artistic journey is that he started as a genius, and that's it. Anytime that his work wasn't accepted, it was because it was always something else, somebody else's fault. It was hung wrong. There were nudes in the public library. Anytime he's not recognized, it is never the fault of his art. In fact, as an artist, he has zero arc to him. He starts one way, he starts at the top as a genius, and by the end of the book, he is still basically a genius artist. So, in terms of, again, like this commentary of art and this commentary of Cricket as an artist, as an independent artist, as an artist with his own values, falls really flat because his values come from an inborn talent that he just had. He never had to work for it. He never had to struggle for it, which would really lend a kind of understanding to why he is so protective of his work. Like, you know, even talented people have to put in the work to become experts at their craft. Like, a talented person against somebody who practices is going to lose every time. Now, the problem, you know, or the reality is that a talented person who also practices is always going to be a person who practices every time. That's the sort of harsh reality of things. But there is no talented person who is just innately so talented that they're the best at everything they do right out the bat. And in that case, Cricket's artistic abilities are borderline anime characters levels of bullshit. And it makes his stubbornness, his refusal to give into anything, feel less like him holding on to that important aspect of himself and more like him just not really caring one way or the other. Like, I don't really want to. I don't really feel like painting that again. I don't really think it'd be any good or whatever, because he's able to paint on demand when people want him to paint things. Even if he just, you know, kind of is like, I don't really like feel like doing that again. I don't think I'd enjoy it. I don't think I'd get it right. But if somebody tells him, you know, I need you to paint something for this gallery, he does it. So it makes that theme that, again, right next to the love story, is at the core of the book, the relationship between art and commerce as represented via Cricket, who never had to struggle for his art, and then Olympia, who is so privileged that she gets just about every single advantage she can via her mother's various flings, affairs, and whatnot. Like, she's able to get studios, she's able to get buildings, she's able to get connections, all because of her stepfathers throughout the entire book. And it is just like the absurd privilege afforded to both of these characters almost renders anything about their story pointless, because neither of them really feel like they work or struggled or earned anything on their own merits. Outside of, for Cricket, I do feel like the things that he earned were his craftsmanship skills, which paradoxically are the things that he's happiest doing, at least when he's able to like kind of earn a living off of them. But the book, again, they're just so shoved in the background. The book never interrogates that. And it's bewildering. It undercuts the whole entire theme of the book. In a way that I just did all these people who are talking about this book being about art. How do you not recognize that? How do you not recognize, as published authors yourself, that Cricket never once struggled to learn how to paint, to learn how to do art, and that Olympia was just given so many different advantages, and that even her drug abuse and her drinking is so stereotypically indicative of the sort of rich attitude, the privileged attitude of people who are able to abuse drugs, who are able to abuse alcohol, and still lead successful lives because they have rehab, because they have money, that even when they tank their entire existences, they're able to just bounce back because they have limitless financial wealth. It's just bewildering that nobody else seems to take issue with that, or take issue with the fact, like I said, everything is so short that nothing has any attachment. Kyle is the character who is praised so much in that one chapter that I mentioned. At the end of Kyle is not seen again after any of that until the end of that part where Kyle shows up and is going to paint or is running to go get them more paint to buy them to support them in this project that they're running. And it's just the way the book presents it. It's like, wow, of all people, Kyle showed up and saved the day. And it's just like, who the fuck cares? It's Kyle, everybody. He was some guy in some chapter. He was not developed at all. So then later on, when Kyle actually becomes the sort of head figure at part 5, I think, it's like, hey guys, it's Kyle again. And Kyle is talking at the big meeting, and he's so eager to meet Cricket again, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I know that part of this is just a facade that Kyle is putting on, like being the sort of friendly everyman, but it's just sort of like, we as readers, it's just like, it's Kyle again, I guess. I don't, like, who the fuck cares about any of these characters? And there's an undercurrent of violence to the book that is so utterly, also doesn't pay off in any way, that's bewildering. In the start of the book, they mentioned that like somebody was killed in the neighborhood. A little girl got raped somewhere in the neighborhood. That never comes up or leads to anything. At the start of part, I think it's 4, Cricket witnesses a girl involved in a hit and run. That never goes anywhere or culminates to anything. There's Jed, who, again, doesn't really have much of a character. We never get to see his family. We only get second, third-hand accounts of his relationship with his father. We're told that he has this new budding fathership with Carpenter, who's the sort of elderly mentor figure to both of them. But again, it's just like when he goes off to Kuwait and dies, it's devastating for the main characters. But again, like, he was just so there that I feel nothing as a reader. Like, oh no, Jed's gone. Oh no, that's tragic. I don't know Jed other than that he's Cricket's friend, and I guess his dad beats him and he's weirdly insecure. So, and it's just another instance of violence in the story. Kyle eventually being shot to death by his wife, who then goes home and shoots herself at the end of part 6. Or no, rather part 5, sorry. It's just yet another instance of just violence in the book. And again, it's never commented on. It never leads to anything. It's just random acts of extreme violence that come out of nowhere, never lead to anything, and are never commented on. And I'm just befuddled by it. And this is kind of just where I'm left wondering what with this book. I feel like, much like The Perfect World, there is a version of this book that is like 2.5 times as long, where Cricket is a way more fleshed out character, where characters all have their different backgrounds filled in, and things make a whole lot more sense. And you have way more time to actually get in, spend time with these characters, let them gain some dimensionality and depth, so that when things happen to them, you understand, and you really feel for them because you see them as people and not just characters in a book. That they really can elevate from that status, so that you can understand, like when Olympia says, Jed, finally, Jed joined the ROTC to get respect from his father and then died for it, so that can hit you as a tragic moment because you understand Jed, you understand how much this meant to him, and you really sympathize with him, rather than it being something that you kind of vaguely understood that his dad beat him, and you kind of vaguely get the sense that this is why he did it, but for the most part, it's just something being told to you after the fact that kind of makes you just go, yep, that sure is tragic. You can recognize it, but you don't feel like maybe it's empathy versus sympathy type thing. But yeah, I want there to be a version of this book where it actualizes on so many of the things that it's trying to do, because it's trying to do so many things that I think are pretty good, but it is so laser focused on the relationship between Cricket and Olympia, which that itself doesn't work because we don't understand Cricket or Olympia as characters, never mind the fact that they're extremely privileged characters beyond that. But everyone around them is so tertiary that the things that happen to them just kind of happen without any emotional resonance on my end as a reader. And again, just I get the sense for the writer that there is so much more to these characters that we don't get to see. It reminds me of Clarissa, going back to The Perfect World, where she's talking about the iceberg effect and how you only see 10% of the novel, but in her head there's 90% of the things going on, and how that's not how the iceberg effect works. The iceberg effect is meant to be thematic, where the novel itself is only 10%, but thematically there's so much deeper going on in terms of what's happening between the lines, in terms of what's happening between the characters' histories and what they're bringing, and blah, 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 blah. Like, iceberg effect, thematic. Not meant to be like, wow, there's so much backstory to these characters that you'll never get to see, despite the fact that that backstory is important to understanding who the characters are and why they act. And that is, unfortunately, the kind of feeling that I'm getting from Contrapposto. That Dave Eggers almost assuredly has a vision in his mind. Let's even just take Cricket. Like, 100% he has a vision of Cricket and who Cricket is. And what to me reads like somebody who is slightly neurodivergent to Dave Eggers, as he was sitting there writing, I imagine came across as something completely different, because he had an understanding of Cricket. He had all this information in his head, and maybe all that information made it into a draft of this story, and then was cut out later so that it could just laser focus in on these key moments. But unfortunately, without that information, none of these key moments have the kind of emotional payoff that I'm looking for. And I seem to be in the minority in that, given, like I said, the insane amount of positivity associated with this book, the 6 blurbs, the front page on Kirkus. Didn't get a star, but that, again, like, considering it was longer book, male author, literary fiction, blah, 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 everything I already mentioned, that doesn't surprise me. I think it got a star on Publishers Weekly. But, yeah, I just... this is the disconnect that I feel that I'm at between myself, what I'm looking for in a book, and the American publishing industry. Like, it's funny that Ruth Ozeki is one of the people on the back blurbs, when her own book, All Over Creation, recently, but I also did read a long, long time ago, A Tale for the Time Being, manages to capture characters and dynamics so much better than this book did. But yeah, this is the disconnect. Not the disconnect, but a demonstration of the disconnect that I feel, where I look at other people and I don't quite get it. And I mentioned in my past review for Never Let Me Go that I don't like the phrase overrated, because it is a judgment of other people and not a judgment of the art itself. I have spent this review talking primarily about my issues with the art itself, but kind of ending on it, I want to talk, or I've been talking about the environment in which it's been received. But I want to be clear that the reason that I'm avoiding or that I'm not saying overrated, or that I feel like bringing up the people external to the art, is that these are the people who are controlling what gets made for better or worse. Like, no, they're not necessarily the publishers themselves, but the publishers are going to pick up books in reaction to the kind of books that frankly sell. And the kinds of books that sell will in many ways be determined by the kind of presence that they have. We live very much in an attention economy, so anything that grabs your attention is going to be king. And I came to this book because of that reception, along with the cover, which the cover is by John Gall, who has done Murakami covers, so another fun little Knopf connection there. Like this is what drew me to the book. This is what made me buy a copy of the book, and it is the disappointment that I am feeling now that leaves me so disillusioned with the American publishing industry, and a demonstration to you all of why I am so hesitant to pick up books from them. Why beyond just the fact, like I said, I do enjoy translated fiction. I think I would read mostly translated fiction no matter what, but why like 90% of my diet is translated fiction. It is because I have had too many instances, like with Contrapposto, of coming to a book that gets all this praise only to be left utterly bewildered by all of it. I mentioned Tomorrow, and yeah, God, I loathed that book with a passion. So this wraps up my extremely long review of Contrapposto. Contrary to everything that I've said, I didn't hate this book. I'm just kind of left with like a mildly negative impression. Like it's just disappointing. It's disappointing because there is a good book in here, and there are times when that book flashes through. But it also just reminds me, and I guess this is another thing, when you're reading a book and you're constantly thinking of other books and how other books did the same thing better, that's not a good time. When I'm reading this book, and I already mentioned Map of the Territory, The Map in the Territory, and how it covered the life of an artist way better. I think of The School of Night and how it talked about art school and really focused in on that character a lot better. I thought about, of course, Killing Commendatore because of the painting things and the painterly details. And while Contrapposto goes into a bit more detail in some sense, I think the art theory in Killing Commendatore was much more compelling. The relationship between Jed and Cricket reminded me a ton of the relationship between the character in The Knicks and his friend when they're younger, and the eventual fate of his friend as that book sort of developed. Like, I just was constantly thinking about other books as I read through Contrapposto, because at the end of the day, Contrapposto itself was just... Shell sounds way too critical, but it really is just more of a sequence of scenes and events starring familiar characters than anything that really comes together for me to deliver the proper emotional payoff that each one of those other books managed to accomplish to varying degrees of success. Like I said, I haven't reread The School of Night, but I was kind of really mixed on it. But to varying degrees of success in a way that this book approaches, but never quite pulls off. And like I said, there's just an alternative world for me where there's a version of this book that again, I don't same thing I said about The School of Night. I don't know if length is the issue, because The Map in the Territory, like I said, accomplished the same thing in a much shorter amount of space. But let's just say a version of this book that is twice as long. I don't know if that's necessary, but whatever. Twice as long, but manages to weave together all these various elements that I'm picking up from other books while still having its own identity, and pulls everything together in this hugely satisfying package that pays off. That is not the book that we got. We got a book that is way too focused on two main characters who, to my estimation, are not are simultaneously not fleshed out enough and not believable enough in their own struggles in order to feel invested in their fates, and a whole bunch of stuff around it that occasionally tries to interrogate itself, but never quite really dives enough into any depth or detail to really strike and say anything meaningful or profound. And also, just the perpetuation of what is ultimately a toxic relationship that is justified in the name of love, even though to really various extents, both Cricket at least is demonstrably happiest when he is away from Olympia. And the way the book ends really just feels like it undercuts that fact. Like it's not really embracing, but like accepting, saying that in the end sort of justified the means, and that is really kind of sick when you consider what the ends are. Sick is a very strong word. It sickens me because I know some people who just get trapped in these toxic relationships, and it's like, no, you need to get the fuck away. You need to learn how to stand on your own. You need to not be dependent on another person for your own happiness. And so to kind of hold, and they always cling to like these ideas of like, but love. And it's like, yes. And I will acknowledge that there is a lot of give in being a loving person, but it's way more complicated than that. It's way more complicated than what this book makes it out to be. So a definite hard pass on Contrapposto. This is probably one of my longest reviews ever because I'm just bewildered. Many feelings about this book, and none of them really super positive. So join me next time when I review I Have No Idea.